Hello and welcome back to A Rose by Any Other Name, the vodcast where we pull Shakespeare apart piece by piece and work out what his plays are actually doing. I am Mr. Rose, and today we're looking at Act 4, Scene 1 of Othello. This is the scene where Othello gets what he believes he wanted, something he can see. If we remember back to Act 3, he demanded ocular proof. Iago now gives him a performance. Othello watches Cassio laugh, sees Bianca carrying the handkerchief, and thinks he's witnessed confirmation of the affair. The problem is that he cannot hear the truth. Iago questions Cassio about Bianca, while Othello watches from hiding. Cassio's smiles and gestures are real. Bianca's anger is real. The handkerchief is real. Only the story connecting them to Desdemona is false. That makes this one of Iago's most sophisticated manipulations. He does not simply tell Othello what happened, he directs a scene, controls the sound, and then lets Othello misread the performance for himself. By the end, Othello has planned two murders. He struck Desdemona in public and destroyed the reputation that once made Venice trust him completely. So, our central question for this episode is, how does Shakespeare show that seeing is not the same as knowing? On the screen, once again, I have our characters in case you need a little bit of a reminder. So, the scene in brief. This scene opens with Iago continuing to torment Othello through sexual images and wordplay. He suggests that Cassio and Desdemona may have kissed, lain naked together, and exchanged the handkerchief. Othello's language begins to disintegrate. Words such as lie, confess, and handkerchief repeat, and they collide until he falls into what looks like an epileptic seizure. Iago watches him collapse and orders his medicine to work. The metaphor makes clear that Iago sees his language as a drug or poison operating through Othello's body. Cassio enters and wants to help, but Iago sends him away. When Othello recovers, Iago attacks his masculinity, telling him to bear his suffering like a man. Iago then outlines his next performance. Othello will hide and watch while Iago questions Cassio. Othello is told that Cassio will discuss Desdemona, but Iago's actually asking him questions about Bianca. Cassio laughs at the idea of marrying Bianca and describes her affection in dismissive terms. And because Othello cannot hear the full conversation, he interprets every smile, every gesture, as a mockery of Desdemona and of himself. Bianca then enters carrying the handkerchief. Angry that Cassio has asked her to copy another woman's token, she throws it back at him. To Othello, this now becomes visible confirmation that Desdemona gave the handkerchief to Cassio. As Cassio's leaving, Othello asks Iago how he should murder him. He still remembers Desdemona's beauty, intelligence, and gentleness, but interprets those virtues now as making her betrayal worse. Othello proposes poison, and Iago instructs him, however, to strangle Desdemona in their marriage bed, turning the place associated with their union into a site of punishment. Lodovico arrives from Venice with Desdemona and some attendants. He brings orders for Othello to return back to Venice and for Cassio to govern Cyprus. When Desdemona expresses happiness at Cassio's promotion, Othello reads it as further evidence of desire and he strikes her in front of Lodovico. Desdemona quietly says she's not deserved the blow. Lodovico is horrified because Othello's behavior contradicts everything that Venice believes about the noble and self controlled general. Othello continues humiliating Desdemona and dismisses her and leaves. Iago then performs reluctance again. He suggests that Lodovico should observe Othello for himself rather than asking Iago to accuse him. The scene ends with Lodovico saying that he has been deceived in Othello. Iago has now damaged Othello's private judgment, his public behavior, and his political reputation. So, what is Shakespeare doing in this scene? So, firstly, he makes language physically overwhelm Othello. In Othello's opening speech, it's broken into fragmented statements with lie on her. Words repeat without producing clarity. He insists that words are not shaking him, yet his body immediately contradicts the claim. Iago's verbal images produce a physical seizure. Shakespeare externalizes psychological collapse here. Jealousy is no longer an idea contained within Othello's mind. It's taken control of his language and his body. Shakespeare also presents Iago as poisoner and false physician. Iago calls his manipulation medicine and commands it to work. He behaves like a doctor monitoring a treatment. The dramatic irony here is that his medicine is actually causing illness rather than curing it. He creates the seizure, controls who can assist Othello, and then manages the recovery. By occupying the role of helper, Iago is strengthening Othello's dependence on the person that's actually harming him. Shakespeare weaponizes masculinity. So, after Othello's collapse, Iago repeatedly tells him to be a man. He frames emotional control, surveillance, and revenge as requirements of the masculine identity. Othello already feels humiliated by this imagined role of cuckold. Iago's references to horns, beasts, and other deceived human intensifies that shame. Masculinity here becomes a trap. To prove he's not weak, Othello must behave according to the violent script that Iago is providing. Shakespeare turns Othello into a hidden spectator. So, this is really interesting. Othello, who was once the commanding center of public action, is told to encave himself and watch from concealment. His physical position reflects his psychological condition. He's separated from direct participation. He's now dependent on fragments, and he's unable to question Cassio openly. Iago takes the role of director that I mentioned in some of the previous episodes. He positions Othello, selects the topic, prompts Cassio's laughter, and explains the performance in advance. Shakespeare then decides to separate sight and sound. Othello sees Cassio's laugh but cannot hear the subject, which is Bianca. He interprets gestures through the story that Iago's already supplied. This exposes the limits of visual evidence. An image does not arrive with one guaranteed meaning. You need context, you need sound, and you need expectation to help shape your interpretation. Othello's ocular proof is failing because he sees accurately but understands falsely. Shakespeare decides to dramatize confirmation bias. Othello expects to see a guilty lover, so every action confirms that expectation. Laughter becomes cruelty, gestures become this sort of sexual storytelling, and Bianca becomes proof of Desdemona's involvement. Evidence that does not fit the story is completely ignored. Cassio never names Desdemona, and Bianca openly says that Cassio found the handkerchief in his room. Iago's greatest achievement is not hiding every fact. It probably comes from creating a belief that is strong enough to reorganize whatever Othello is seeing. Shakespeare uses Bianca as an unwilling actor. When Bianca enters without knowing that she's part of Iago's performance, her anger places the handkerchief in Othello's view at exactly the right moment. She tells the truth as she understands it. Cassio found the object in his room and asked her to copy it. Othello hears none of that explanation. Bianca is exploited here by Iago and dismissed by Cassio. Her lower social status makes it easy for the men to use her body, her emotions, and her reputation without treating her as a credible source. Shakespeare converts love into a justification for violence, or wants to show us, this justification for violence that people can depend upon. So, after deciding that Desdemona must die, Othello continues praising her beauty, her skill, and her gentleness. His love has not disappeared completely. Instead of allowing affection to challenge suspicion, Othello turns Desdemona's virtues into reasons that the betrayal is more painful and her punishment is all the more necessary. This is a crucial moral collapse. He begins describing murder as justice and refuses to speak with Desdemona because he fears that her humanity might change his mind. Shakespeare makes Iago design the murder. When Othello asks for poison, Iago chooses strangulation in the marriage bed. The method is intimate, symbolic, and connected to the alleged offense. Iago is no longer merely encouraging revenge. He determines the location and the method of Desdemona's death. Othello's response, the justice of it pleases, shows how completely Iago has replaced moral reasoning with theatrical symmetry. Shakespeare then moves Othello's collapse from private to public. Earlier, only Iago witnessed Othello's doubts and his seizure. Lodovico's arrival brings Venetian authority into the scene. Othello strikes Desdemona in public and turns private jealousy into an observable violence. His behavior can no longer be contained within the marriage. The timing of this is politically disastrous. Venice has just ordered Othello home and Cassio into his position, so Othello experiences another threat to his identity and his status as he loses control. Shakespeare uses Lodovico as an audience surrogate. So Lodovico remembers the Othello admired by the Senate: noble, sufficient, stable, and resistant to passion. His shock mirrors that of the audience's recognition of how far Othello has changed. He compares the man before him with the public reputation that was established all the way back in Act 1. Lodovico's presence also means Othello's transformation now has an external witness who can carry that judgment back to Venice. Shakespeare allows Iago to control Othello's public story. This is seen when Iago asks whether Othello regularly behaves this way. Iago refuses to give a direct answer. His apparent loyalty makes that insinuation all the more damaging. It's destructive. He invites Lodovico to watch Othello and to reach his own conclusion. He repeats the same method used back on Othello. Iago stages behavior, withholds explanation, and lets observers believe that they've discovered the truth independently. By the end, Iago controls not only Othello's view of Desdemona, but Venice's emerging view of Othello. Let's now talk about how the audience is positioned within this scene. The audience is positioned as the only group with full access to the performance. We hear Iago's plan, we hear Cassio's actual words, we hear Othello's whispered interpretations, and we hear Bianca's explanation. This creates intense dramatic irony. Othello believes he is finally seeing truth, while we can identify every gap between observation and conclusion. We're also positioned to recognize Iago once again as a director. He controls where Othello stands, what Cassio discusses when Bianca enters, and how each gesture will be interpreted. Our response to Othello here becomes more critical. He remains deceived, but now actively plans murder. He refuses to question Desdemona and commits public violence. Victimhood does not erase responsibility. Bianca and Desdemona invite sympathy for women whose emotions are interpreted through male suspicion. Bianca's anger is mocked, while Desdemona's tears are dismissed as a performance. Lodovico's horror confirms that Othello's behavior is not normal, private, or excusable. And as the audience, we see the tragic hero losing not only love and judgment, but also the reputation that once defined him. Let's have a look at our key quotes now. Lie with her, lie on her. We say lie on her when they belie her. The repetition and pun show that Othello's mind is circling around sex, accusation, and falsehood. Language no longer organizes thought here. The fragmented syntax provides clear evidence of psychological disintegration before the seizure. As he's speaking, it's very choppy. I know that that's probably not an English term, but you're seeing the way that it's fragmented. He's having trouble putting together a clear and coherent sentence, which is giving us an insight into the way that his mind is working. Our second quote: handkerchief, confessions, handkerchief. The list reduces Iago's separate fabrications into a single imagined chain of proof. Othello repeats object and accusation without testing their connection. Shakespeare uses the repetition to show obsessive thought replacing rational judgment. When Iago says, "Work on, my medicine, work, thus credulous fools are caught," Iago treats language as a drug acting on Othello's mind and body. Credulous identifies Othello's readiness to believe. The metaphor here presents Iago as both poisoner and the false physician, causing the illness he appears to manage. Our fourth quote: a horned man's a monster and a beast. The horns here symbolize the cuckolded husband. Othello previously imagined sexual betrayal as this transformation that removes his humanity. By using the animal imagery, it reveals the social shame that Iago is exploiting and Othello's fear that masculinity depends on being able to control his wife's sexuality. Do but encave yourself and mark the fleers, the gibes, and notable scorns that dwell in every region of his face. Iago instructs Othello here to read Cassio's face before the conversation begins. The verb encave moves Othello into concealment and isolation. The line shows Iago's controlling both the staging and the interpretation. Othello watches through an expectation of guilt. His bookish jealousy must construe poor Cassio's smiles, gestures, and light behaviors quite in the wrong. Iago knows Othello will construe or interpret innocent behavior incorrectly. Unbookish here is suggesting inexperience or lack of sophistication. The quote openly explains the scene's dramatic method. True gestures are converted into false evidence by jealous interpretation. Look how he laughs already. Othello immediately treats Cassio's laughter as confirmation. He cannot hear that Cassio is discussing Bianca, so the line captures confirmation bias. Othello sees what Iago has taught him to expect. Our eighth quote: by heaven, that should be my handkerchief. Bianca's Bianca's possession of the handkerchief provides the visual moment Othello craves. The object appears to connect Cassio with Desdemona. We, as the audience, know that the object was planted. Its appearance is real, but the story attached to it is manufactured. In our ninth quote, "How shall I murder him, Iago?" Othello no longer asks whether Cassio is guilty. This concern comes from the method of killing him. It marks the movement from this false judgment to planned violence and shows Othello surrendering moral authority to Iago. Our 10th quote, "My heart is turned to stone. I strike it and it hurts my hand." The metaphor here presents Othello as emotionally hardened, yet the pain in his hand reveals that feeling has not disappeared. His remaining love does not prevent violence. It is reinterpreted as suffering that punishment will resolve. But yet the pity of it, Iago. Oh, Iago, the pity of it, Iago. Repetition here shows grief surviving beside murderous intention. Othello recognizes Desdemona's goodness but assumes guilt anyway. The line creates tragic conflict between love and revenge while revealing how completely Othello relies on Iago for emotional direction. Strangle her in the bed. Let's look at this quote in its full. "Do it not with poison, strangle her in her bed, even the bed she hath contaminated." Iago chooses an intimate method and locates the murder in the marriage bed. The punishment is made to mirror the imagined sexual crime. The bed now changes from a symbol of union to an execution site. It shows Iago's control over the tragedy's symbolism as well as its plot. Good, good, the justice of it pleases, very good. Iago labels murder as justice. Did I say Othello? Sorry, Othello labels murder as justice, and repeats approval. Moral language disguises revenge as righteous punishment. This is one of the clearest signs of ethical collapse. Othello believes violence restores order when it actually completes Iago's design. I have not deserved this. Desdemona responds to the public blow with direct moral clarity. The simple sentence contrasts with Othello's earlier fragmented abuse. Her words establish innocence while exposing the gap between punishment and evidence. "This would not be believed in Venice, though I should swear I saw it." Lodovico struggles to reconcile what he witnesses with Othello's established reputation. Even direct sight seems unbelievable. The irony reverses Othello's error. Othello believes a false performance, while Lodovico doubts a true event, because reputation here shapes perception. Our 16th quote, "If that the earth could teem with woman's tears, each drop she falls would prove a crocodile." Othello interprets Desdemona's tears as a false performance, drawing on the image of deceptive crocodile tears. Jealousy makes innocence impossible to demonstrate. Every emotional response becomes further evidence of deceit. Our 17th quote, "Is this the noble Moor whom our full senate call in all sufficient?" The rhetorical question measures present Othello against the respected general that was established back in Venice. Lodovico becomes a public witness to Othello's transformation and signals the collapse of his political reputation. And lastly, he is much changed. Iago states the truth while concealing his responsibility for the change. The restrained sentence makes him appear sadly objective. The dramatic irony is severe. Iago comments on the transformation that he engineered and uses it to shape Lodovico's judgment. So let's bring this together. Act 4, Scene 1 is a scene about spectatorship. Othello believes watching will free him from uncertainty, but Iago controls the performance, the context, and the interpretation. The scene proves that visible evidence is not automatically truthful. Cassio really laughs. Bianca holds the handkerchief. Desdemona really celebrates Cassio's promotion. None of these actions, however, mean what Othello believes they mean. Othello's error moves beyond private jealousy. He plans murder, accepts Iago's method, strikes Desdemona, and reveals his transformation to a representative of Venice. For an external exam, this scene supports arguments with dramatic irony, manipulation, jealousy, the idea of proof. If you're looking at particular themes like gender, masculinity, reputation, public versus private identity, as well as Othello's moral decline. On the screen now, I have 20 of the exam focused discussions. I know that there is many, and I do encourage you to have a go answering a couple of these. I'm now moving on to our final challenge. So, our final challenge is for you to choose one visual event from the scene. Is it Cassio laughing? Maybe it's Bianca holding the handkerchief, or Desdemona expressing happiness at Cassio's promotion, or Othello striking his wife, Desdemona. I want you to explain what actually happens, what a character believes it means, and how prior expectations shape that interpretation. Then, respond to this claim. In Act 4, Scene 1, Shakespeare proves that sight becomes dangerous when someone else controls the story. So, at the beginning of this scene, Othello's private suspicion overwhelms his body, and by the end, that suspicion has become public violence. He's seen a performance, mistaken it for proof, and allowed Iago to turn observation into murder. In Act 4, Scene 2, Othello will interrogate Desdemona directly. It's the moment I'm sure many students are waiting for and screaming, why doesn't he just speak to his wife? The tragedy is, however, that he will ask questions only after deciding that none of her answers can be believed. Until then, I am Mr. Rose, and this has been A Rose by Any Other Name. Thank you.